The door to my apartment was slightly ajar. My hands still smelled faintly of lilies, the last bouquet I had placed on my mother's coffin, the final farewell I had whispered in a voice she could barely hear. My heart ached, a hollow, gnawing ache that didn't go away when people said time heals. My name is Clara Bennett, 35, married for 7 years, no children, by choice. Or so I thought. My mother passed quietly in her sleep, leaving behind whispers that felt like secrets meant only for me. At her funeral, while everyone else smiled politely through their grief, she had clutched my hand and said, "They won't see your worth, but you will." I didn't understand then. Not fully. But now, standing outside my own home, I finally did. I checked the second drawer in her study after the service, alone. Inside was a folder, old and creased, containing deeds to 2 farms in North Carolina, a Palm Beach mansion fully paid off, and a will. Everything was mine. Just mine. No one else. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering with a strange mixture of fear and hope. Maybe this, finally, would be the moment my life felt like it belonged to me. Maybe we would finally come together as a family. But the moment I reached for my front door, I froze. Laughter. Her voice. My sister-in-law's laugh. Her father's chuckle. "She's so gullible," they said, mocking me. "Mom's gone, he's got no one now." I stood there, a stranger in my own life. My chest tightened. They didn't even know I was listening. They were celebrating my absence, celebrating my grief. Every word felt like a knife carving its way into the hollow space where love should have been. Her sister sneered. Did she really think she could trust him? My stomach twisted at the words, though they weren't directed at me. The contempt was clear. I didn't open the door. Instead, I took a single step back and let the cool evening air wrap around me. My fingers curled tight around the folder in my coat pocket. They didn't know what I had found. They didn't deserve to. Not yet. I drove to the old diner off Route 9, the one my mother used to take me to when the world felt too heavy. I slid into a corner booth, the vinyl creaking beneath me, and spread the documents across the table. 2 farms, a mansion, and my mother's final words etched on paper. Do not let them take what they never valued. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from fury and something else, clarity. She had trusted me, even when they hadn't. She had believed I was the one who could do what they couldn't, honor her memory, and set things right. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a motel room under a different name. I called an old attorney friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Are you still handling estate law?" I asked. A pause. Then, "Yes, why?" I stared at the ceiling. "Because it's time to disappear." Quietly. By 6 a.m., steam curled from my coffee cup, and the papers lay in front of me like a map to a future I had never dared to imagine. My phone buzzed, 17 missed calls, a voicemail from my husband.
He didn't know what had changed.
He couldn't see what had already been set in motion. I didn't reply. I sent a short email to the family accountant. Freeze all shared assets. Legal review pending. The first spark of justice had been lit. And this time, I wasn't the one being burned. I left the diner before sunrise, the world still gray and quiet, as if it were holding its breath with me. The folder was heavy in my bag, but the weight wasn't just paper, it was responsibility and maybe, finally, power. I rented a car under another name and started driving south toward the mansion in Palm Beach. I wanted to see it first, to understand what my mother had left me before anyone else could. The gates were rusted, overgrown with ivy, but the mansion itself stood like a monument. White columns gleaming faintly in the morning light, palms swaying as if keeping secrets. I felt my chest tighten. This was more than money. This was her life, her memories, her trust. Inside, the air smelled like citrus and dust, a strange mix that made me think of sunlit mornings and whispered confidences. An older man, the caretaker Ramon, watched me with careful eyes. She loved this house, he said. Played piano in that sunroom for hours, long before you were born. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. My mother had lived in more than one world. It seemed a world I had barely glimpsed. I moved room to room slowly, absorbing the quiet. Every faded wallpaper, every dusty chandelier spoke of a life hidden from prying eyes, a life she had built carefully and now entrusted to me. In the study, I found a safe tucked behind a bookcase. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were more deeds, photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. Clara, this is yours, not just by blood, but by integrity.
If they try to take it, let them.
You don't need to fight. You only need to reveal. I sank into the leather chair, the weight of her words pressing on me. She had given me the tools to end everything without lifting a hand in anger, but with all the power of truth. I let the silence settle around me, filling the corners of the grand room with a strange, steady calm. By morning, I had made a plan. At exactly 9:01 a.m., I uploaded the documents to the cloud, a scanned copy of the will, property lists, and a letter my mother had addressed, to whom it may concern. It was more than legal paperwork. It was a record of the manipulation, the lies, the cruelty I had endured from my husband's family. I didn't release it publicly, not yet. Just to the one person who could act with authority, the corporate compliance officer in my husband's company. 5 minutes later, an email arrived. Ms. Bennett, we'd like to schedule a formal conversation regarding fiduciary misrepresentation. I smiled quietly to myself. The wheels were turning, consequences arriving exactly as they should.
My phone rang.
Her first, my husband. I ignored it. Her sister.
Ignored.
Her father. Ignored. Then a text from him. Clara, you need to stop this. You're being cruel. Cruel. I stared at the word. They had mocked my grief, laughed at my mother's death, celebrated my absence, and now, when the truth arrived, I was cruel? I typed a single word in reply, reveal. The next hours were a whirlwind. The company board called an emergency meeting. Her father, the chair, was forced to step down pending investigation. My husband tried again, pleading, calling, messaging, but I let it ring. The power shift was quiet but irreversible. Sitting in the mansion sunroom, the sunlight hitting my mother's old piano, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Not revenge, not anger, but justice. It was the calm satisfaction of knowing that the people who had celebrated my loss were finally confronted with the truth. I looked out at the overgrown gardens, the palms swaying like silent witnesses. This land, this legacy, wasn't just real estate. It was my mother's final gift, a chance to reclaim my life and my dignity. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of freedom. Not triumph, not gloating, just the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had done right by her. By late morning, I had walked every inch of the mansion, letting the quiet sink in, the air thick with memory and unspoken truths. The documents were still in my bag, but the plan was clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was mine and honoring the woman who had believed in me when no one else did. I started making calls, careful, deliberate, strategic. First, the family accountant, someone who had always treated my mother with respect. Freeze all shared assets immediately. Legal review pending. I said calmly. No pleading. No begging. Just facts. The responses came back faster than I expected. Her father's face appeared in every email thread, tense and controlled. Her sister's tone was sharp, venom wrapped in faux concern. My husband, the one I had trusted, sent a string of frantic texts, each one more desperate than the last. Clara, please, we can fix this. Don't make this worse.
I didn't respond.
Instead, I walked out to the gardens, palms swaying in the morning breeze, the sun warm on my face. The land stretched endlessly before me, 2 farms, the mansion, all waiting for me to claim them, waiting for me to set the record straight. It was in that moment, standing there with the wind in my hair and my mother's words echoing in my mind, that I felt it, the full weight of her trust. She had left me not just property, but the power to right every wrong. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I only needed to act. By noon, the first tremors of consequence hit. The corporate compliance officer replied with a formal acknowledgement. We are reviewing your submission. Immediate action is being taken. Her father, the chair of the board, had stepped down pending investigation. My husband tried calling again. I let it ring. Her sister sent an email, sharp, trying to guilt me, trying to spin me as cruel. But the cruelty wasn't mine. It had been theirs all along. I pulled out the letter my mother had left in the safe, rereading the words that now felt like a battle plan. Reveal. You don't need to fight. You only need to reveal. I smiled. Reveal. That one word carried more weight than any argument, any confrontation. It was the quiet hammer of justice, striking without warning, leaving no room for denial. Late afternoon, I sat in the sunroom, staring at the piano my mother had loved. My phone buzzed, another string of missed calls and frantic texts. I ignored them. Instead, I drafted a detailed plan for the farms. They wouldn't be private estates or holiday homes.
No.
They would become a grief therapy retreat, a place where people who had lost everything could come and heal. This was more than strategy. This was reclamation. This was honoring the life my mother had lived and the woman I was becoming. And it had the added weight of poetic justice. The people who had celebrated my grief were powerless to stop it. Evening fell. The mansion bathed in soft orange light. I stood on the balcony, looking out at the land stretching toward the horizon, feeling for the first time in years the sweet, steady pulse of control, of justice being served. The air smelled faintly of citrus, of lilies, of possibility. And deep down, beneath every strategy, every calculated move, I knew the truth. They had underestimated me. Always. But my mother hadn't. She had left me more than property. She had left me the power to stand tall when everyone else had celebrated my fall.
By the next morning, the mansion was quiet, almost reverent. I had spent the night walking through the rooms, touching the walls my mother had loved, inhaling the faint scent of old books and cedars. Every corner reminded me WHA was here not just for the property, but for her and for myself. The knock came. I had known it would. Aisla deliberately knocked at the front door. My husband, standing there in a designer coat, sunglasses hiding his eyes, and that carefully practiced panic he always for moments when he thought he could manipulate me. Clara, he began, his voice unnervingly calm, we can fix this. Please, it's not too late. I studied his face and mask of confidence crumbling ever so slightly, the first cracks of panic showing. But I didn't answer. I only reached into my back and pulled out a folder, the deeds. To the farms, I said quietly. You may visit, but only with permission. Here being converted into a grief therapy retreat for people having unreal laws. He stirred. Chess is flicked to the folder, 10 to the mansion, 10 back to me. There was nothing left for him here. Nothing to manipulate. Nothing to control. You're being called, he whispered. No, I said, combat unwavering. This is me stopping the pretense. This is me being honest for the first time. He looked past me, as if hoping to find remnants of the life he thought he owned. There was nothing, just the sunlit rooms, the dusty piano, and a woman finally reclaiming her life. Each's sister stepped forward, voice sharp, trying one last manipulation. Clara, you don't have to do this. We can all make amends. I raised my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. You made your choice. Not once, not twice, but a pattern. I only needed one thing, the truth. I stepped aside to reveal a framed photo on the table, a younger version of me, arms muddy from planting, smiling at my mother, sunlight streaming across the garden. Her gaze seemed to hold the answer she had trusted me to know, and the time was right. This isn't revenge, I said, voice steady, almost soft. It's reclamation. What you discarded, what you lied about, what you celebrated, it ends now. Silence fell. Not the awkward silence of defeat, but the heavy, undeniable silence of consequences arriving. Whose bands emails and calls had become irrelevant, each's voice powerless. The complaints officer had done their part, her father's position on the board was radioactive, and the truth at her stood like a monument in my hands. He tried one last tactic, an email, a simple line, we were both wrong. Maybe here's a way forward. I read it twice. No temptation. No hesitation. Only the stark realization that there was no we in the story. Only betrayal, silence, and my survival. I didn't reply. I walked to the balcony, letting the Florida breeze carol through my hair. Workers were already surveying the land for the therapy retreat. A place for others to heal. A place for me to remember that I survived, that I reclaimed my life on my terms. I pulled out my phone, pinned the last photo I had of my mother smiling in her garden, and whispered, I kept my promise. And for the first time in years, I felt still. Not triumphant, not victorious. Just free. The mansion behind me no longer haunted me. It belonged to me, stripped of pretense, lit by truth. If you ever felt powerless or doubted your worth, remember this, the quiet strength of truth is unstoppable. Stand firm, act wisely, and the world will bend to the weight of its right.
The mansion was quiet that morning, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. I walked through the sunroom again, fingers tracing the dusty piano keys my mother had loved. Every note seemed to echo a memory, a whisper of her trust in me. This land, these walls, weren't just real estate. They were her final gift. I stepped onto the balcony and looked out at the sprawling gardens, the palms swaying in the Florida breeze. Workers were already marking plots for the therapy retreat, a place for people who had known grief, loss, and betrayal, a place to heal. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just protecting an inheritance. I was reclaiming a part of myself. The phone buzzed. Another email from my husband. Another string of desperate calls. He was trying still to twist the narrative, to make it about him, to make me doubt myself. I ignored it. This was no longer his story. His sister's messages piled up too, each one more frantic, more pleading, but they were just echoes now. Their influence, their control, it had ended the moment I acted. I pulled the last photo of my mother from my bag, her hands in the garden soil, a radiant smile on her face, and whispered, "We did it, Mom. I kept my promise." I spent the next hours reviewing every document, every plan for the estate. The 2 farms would become the grief therapy retreat, funded by the proceeds of my mother's estate. The mansion itself? A quiet sanctuary, a place where I could come when I needed solitude, or remember her strength, her foresight, and the lessons she had left me. By mid-afternoon, I finally allowed myself to breathe. 4 months, my life had been a storm of manipulation, betrayal, and grief. Now there was calm. Not victory, not gloating, but a stillness that came from standing firmly in the truth. The last email from my husband arrived. Just one word this time. Clara. Nothing else. I didn't reply. I walked through the sunlit halls one last time before heading to the balcony. The breeze carried the faint scent of citrus and lilies, the lingering mark of my mother's life, her wisdom, and her love. I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle over me. For years, I had felt powerless, trapped in a life dictated by others' lies and manipulation. But my mother had seen me clearly, even when no one else did. She had trusted me with more than wealth. She had trusted me with justice, with integrity, with the strength to stand tall when the world tried to break me. And now I had. I walked to the edge of the property, watching the horizon stretch endlessly. The Florida sun warmed my face, the palms whispered above me, and I felt it. Freedom. Not the fleeting, superficial freedom of wealth or status, but the deep, unshakable freedom that comes when you reclaim your life on your terms. I pulled out my phone and captured a photo of the sunrise over the retreat grounds. This would be the beginning of something new, not just for me, but for everyone who would come here seeking healing. I whispered again to my mother, "You were right. I did it. I survived. And I will honor you." The house behind me was no longer a prison of lies. It was a sanctuary of truth, integrity, and quiet justice. And I was no longer the person who had walked into that world blindly. I was the woman who had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her mother's trust. If you've ever felt trapped by people who don't value you, remember this. Sometimes the quietest actions have the loudest impact. Stand firm. Trust your instincts. And never forget, you have the power to reclaim your life, just like I did.